Mayor on the phone?
Hello, Your Worship, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Welcome to the meeting.
It's
7:02, we'll call the meeting to order and transfer the chair to Councilman Bartlett.
Okay, good evening, folks. Do we have any declarations of financial interest? None, carrying on, no delegations. Can I get somebody to move the agenda be adopted? Councilor Coolbet.
I move the agenda be adopted as presented.
Seconded by Councilor Cox. Mr. Morrison.
Thank you. We have several additional expressions of interest we would like to add to the agenda. Under item 7B, Economic Development Advisory Board, I would like to add item 1, which is Economic Development Advisory Board expression of interest, Jem Haydeman and Pierre Chagnon. Or Chalon, I don't think there was an I in there, apologies. Further, I would like to add under other business, item 10B, Board of Revision, to get that rolling with council. And to talk about expressions of interest with respect to that. And finally, under item 10A, expressions of interest, there is one currently before council, like Alexander Pryor. I would like to add an additional expression of interest by Debbie Payne. Now, the 3 expressions of interest noted from James, Pierre, and Debbie are all on council's desk.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Coolbet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Further to an email that I sent to Mayor and Council, I would like to add an additional item. Just not exactly sure where on the agenda. I'll say under business is a request for a Portsmouth Health Center update in light of the new CEO or COO. And an additional item under other business, draft NWP AC resolutions.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, that's enough anyway. That'll keep us going. Councilor Coolbet and Councilor Cox, you okay with the minutes? Okay, all those in favor? And motion is carried. Okay, the minutes of the December 8th, 2020 package is in your package and have been reviewed at council meeting on December 15th. Any questions there? Okay, carrying on, vision and values, they're in your package as well. Don't see any questions. Community Services Master Plan. Okay, next, Economic Development Plan. Okay, we'll jump right into the Director's Report. Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Ms. White.
It's me. I'll start with statistics for the recreation center. Nothing particularly standing out there. We have added more sessions for seniors walking, but we haven't had a lot of participation. And I'm not sure we'll get a lot in January based on this weather. People might stay outside. Our youth night programming continues on. Our older group is using it the least, so that 16 to 17-year-old age group. So we are evaluating how that youth night looks and might increase the times for the two younger groups if that continues on. So swimming pool has been down for mechanical issues. We had another leak in a pipe. Big kudos to Municipal Services for getting on it so quickly, and it is going to be up and running as of tomorrow. We had permission, I think, end of day yesterday from the environmental health officer to get started. So just made sure staffing and everything was in place for today and advertising. So we'll be back up tomorrow. People who had rented it over the Christmas holidays, that went down on the 20th. People who rented over the Christmas holidays will be contacted to rebook so they don't miss out on their opportunity, because there is a maximum amount of times that we want people booking public swim at any given time so that we can have maximum access. But you'll see that our public swims continue to be well used, our pool rentals, I should say, continue to be well used. In November, we had 27 sessions and 25 rented. In December, before the shutdown, we had 12 sessions that were available and 10 of those were rented. And I know that it was pretty packed over the Christmas holidays. Almost every session was booked over the Christmas holidays, including additional ones that we had added. The max, that was in November. On December 6th, there was a book sale that the Friends of the Library hosted, and there was 48 people who attended for that in the gymnasium. The arena continues to be well used. We did add some additional sessions for rentals over the holidays, and again, there were 13 sessions, and 10 of those were rented. So we're happy with that. Public skates continues to be good. Family skates a little bit low. I think families might have been out doing other things in December. I will notice though that parents have talked to had more sessions in December, because we had just started that in November, and we had 15 uses of that program. In regards to, the pool up and running is our big thing at the rec center. All other programming continues as is, based on our approval from public health. Library, lots of use of the book delivery, which is increasing all the time. So more books, more people, more households, not including the 40,000 books that get delivered to my house every week. And they're currently working on a plan to expand the age for computer use access, because we are not seeing the computer use we thought we would. It is a bit delicate in regards to making sure that we don't have kids piling into the building. We'll have a limited number of youth able to come in at any time. We'll follow, it'll be eight and up, unattended, which is our sort of standard for all of our facilities. And they'll be on probably half-hour sessions with cleaning in between. And we'll have to come up with some sort of booking system, because we can imagine that the kids will come right after school and all want to get on the computers, and we'll have to get close to that. So we're just working on planning for that to make sure it's efficient and fair for all the kids. Story time continues on. We're going to be starting to host live story time in the gymnasium so that parents can socially distance, and we'll continue to show that on YouTube as well for those families that don't want to come in. And so we'll probably do it in conjunction with parents and props. Gym time. Also the library staff will be going into the daycare once a week to run story time there. We're also going to be seeing Parks Canada coming into the daycare to run, the after school care program and the daycare to run some programming with their visitor services department. So we're excited to get some more stuff going on in the facility. I think those are the big things for the department. Shout out to the builders of the Calder rink. The boards are up. It's not flooded because it's too warm. But, you know, it is to be -30 again next week. I don't know if it actually is, but we'll get that. We'll get that ice in there for community members. And I've already had people talk to me about it and say they're really happy to see it there. So I think that's it for community services or for recreation.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, we'll move right on. You might as well talk to us about the economic development report.
Haven't included a new economic development report because our economic development officer was off for most of December, so no real new things have occurred. I do want to give you a quick update. We're anticipating that the consultants will be doing some online focus groups for our marketing plan before the end of January and into early February. We haven't got the exact timelines yet, but that's what we anticipate as the next steps in the plan. So some of you may be contacted yet again to participate.
Thank you. Mr. Morrison.
Thank you. I'd add that also we have confirmed we have received Canada funding $50,000 to advance the economic development zone initiatives. I don't know if I told council that, but it's official. We've got the letter. We've got the money. So we have to get, they're a pay on receipt sort of organization. So we have to get to work on the ground now. So we look to advancing that over the next quarter.
Thank you. Okay, moving right along, advisory boards. Community Services Advisory Board. Councilor Cox.
Thank you. So these are the minutes from the December meeting. The board discussed at the time the new CSAB policy, which, if you remember, combined the recreation and advisory board on culture into one board. And then there was also discussion about ongoing renovations at the Community Recreation Center. And the rates and fees were discussed in the context of what information the CSAB would like to have the next time that it is requested by council to increase recreation rates and fees. So that request did not happen for the 2021 budget, just to be clear. But there was lots of discussion about what information is optimal for making that decision when that decision was made for the 2020 budget. So there's some discussion around that. And then town donations to local organizations and a policy to support the existing donation policy for the town. That was the beginning of CSAB's discussions. So those discussions started in December and they continued today at length with the board meeting today. And that is a synopsis of the December meeting. There was one comment. Oh yes, I wanted to share with council tonight from today's meeting. A shout out to the Municipal Services Department for the clearing of Tabasha Trail on Primrose and Calder. That comment was made by board members today who were very appreciative of the work the town is doing to clear the trail and keep it clear for people to use, especially with all the snowfall we've had this winter. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a few good comments on Facebook too about the town crews keeping the trails on Calder and Primrose clean as well. So moving on, we have some expressions of interest. I guess we'll start with Mr. Heidema first. Mr. Morrison.
So I'm looking at the agenda. There is the CSAP policy is on as item 782.
Oh, shoot, sorry.
I presume it's in the package. Okay, and so for council's background on this, with the creation of the Community Services Advisory Board, which is an amalgamation of the Advisory Board on Culture and the Recreation Advisory Board, basically we took physical and non-physical recreation, smashed them together. They are sort of empowered by the town bylaw, the advisory board bylaw, which has subset policies which speak to the roles and duties of each advisory board. So one of the first tasks of Community Services Advisory Board was to author their policy. They did, and they made a recommendation in their last set of minutes to bring that policy before council. So being good minions, we hereby bring that policy before council for review and approval.
Councilor Cox.
Yes, thank you. I move that policy GV 302, the powers and duties of the Community Services Advisory Board, be adopted as presented.
And seconder, Councilor Campbell. Any discussion? Councilor Cox.
Just a quick comment that, again, this was discussed by CSAD during the December meeting, and the policy as presented in the package is reflective of the discussion that members had about the combining of the two boards.
Thank you. Mr. Morrison.
And just to add to that, the majority of the document is boilerplate. The only place where it really differentiates between the various advisory boards is on page 4, item 7, where it actually drills down and talks about what this specific advisory board does, i.e. actively promoting culture, recreation, and healthy active living in the community, etc. So this is where they tried to take the policy for the advisory board on culture, where it talked about defining culture as language and literacy and art and education, and then definitions of recreation, and putting them all together to create a board that is responsible for, should I say, the softer side of what we do as municipality, the less legislated to do and the more things we feel are right to do as a community, because it's good for our sense of wellness, our sense of community life, and again, our town goal to be the healthiest community in the Northwest Territories. Although Councilor Cooper, if I recall correctly, wanted it to be the healthiest community in Canada.
Any other discussion? Okay, so all those in favor? And the motion is carried. Okay, next we have expression of interest. Mr. Morrison. You got 3 of them.
You have 3 of them. They are self-explanatory. They are all expressions of interest. 2 are renewals, if I recall correctly, or are they all 3 renewals? They're all 3 renewals, people whose terms expired.
Councilor Cox.
I move that Jonah Mitchell be reappointed to the Community Services Advisory Board for a 2-year term ending December 31st, 2022.
Any second? Councilor Gruber. Discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, we have a couple more here that I put on the wrong page. We'll start with Mr. Heidema. Councilor Quebec.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For convenience, I'll roll the 2 of them into one motion.
Okay, yeah.
I move that Jim Heidemann and Pierre Chevillon be reappointed to the Economic Development Advisory Board for a 2-year term ending December 31st, 2022.
Seconder, Councillor Cox. Discussion? All those in favor? And motion is carried. Next is the Economic Development Advisory Board. Councillor Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The advisory board hasn't had a meeting since I believe the end of November, so there's no new business to report. One sort of associated item we had discussed on December 8th under the Municipal Services Advisory, or the Municipal Services Standing Committee. I made reference to a document being issued for a climate change hub for Atlantic Canada. That in the same article, they had indicated that there would be a call sometime in the future for a hub in the north. And the north being described as Northwest Territories, Yukon, and Nunavut. I have since found the document for the terms of reference and preparation guidelines for the Atlantic Hub proposal call and have forwarded that to administration. And there's a thought that that might be a task that the Economic Development Advisory Board could look at to see whether the town or the community should pursue this.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, moving on to bylaw, policy and review and development. Anything on that? Nothing on that. Administration, COVID-19 update.
Thank you. Other than the news, no news other than the news, which is if you watch the occurrences in southern Canada, things continue to deteriorate. Meanwhile, we are able to exist here quite oblivious to what's happening down south other than the travel ban. There are no current cases in Fort Smith, no current cases in the NWT. We have the lowest case count in all of Canada. So beyond that, I did have, it's called a community checkup, where members of the COVID Secretariat and regional and HQYK government officials zoomed in and spoke with us to do a check-in on the town. The deck associated with that, so the PowerPoint deck was forwarded to council. You should have seen the comments there. There were a number of presentations, and the ADM of MACA spoke and talked about the emergency preparedness of the town. He spoke to the mature emergency response capabilities of the town, and that there were absolutely no concerns there. I spoke to the fact that one of the things, we learned during Operation Nanook, and we've really learned now, is that we really have to be more cognizant of private sector resources when planning for emergency response. When you look at the town's emergency response plan, it's supported by bylaw. Council should have a copy of it. Fundamentally, it is just an inventory of resources. That's all the emergency response plan is, because you need a document that's robust and flexible and versatile enough to deal with any emergency. You can't presuppose every emergency. So one of the ways you deal with that is you just list all the tools available to you. And then you hope that when the emergency occurs, if you have the list of all the tools, you have the smarts to use the tools appropriately. One of the things our emergency plan does is, in anticipation and acknowledgement that the fire threat, the forest fire threat to the community is by far the greatest threat, we have an extended, more step-by-step plan in our emergency plan for forest fire response. And so we know areas where we can improve our forest fire response, and there's a number of boxes we have to, I think, check there to improve that. Further, I think we've determined that we should examine other areas where we need to develop specific response plans. Of course, right now we've learned that, hey, this flu thing may not end, and so we should put a pandemic-specific response into our emergency plan. And then the other one that is, the other biggest threat to the community is loss of power during the winter, and have warming shelters and such available for residents and to be able to maintain town facilities. But one of the things we've really learned here is that our resource list that we have, it's all government resources. It's what resources are available from the GNWT, what resources the town has, what resources the feds have, what transportation resources are out there, et cetera. But what we're learning is that a lot of the pressure points we're seeing is with private sector resources, and that we really have to pay attention to that. We learned that in Nanook when we ran a simulated ride at a gas station, when we said, okay, where's the pressure point going to be? It's going to be people fueling up, trying to get the heck out of town. And so we went, we had actors pretending to ride, we had the police respond, we had the mayor filming the whole darn thing. I don't know if you remember that. But in this, we've learned that our pressure points are going to be a game on if we have a pandemic in the middle of winter. And not do any failed response on our part, but due to collapses outside of our jurisdiction, we no longer get heating fuel. What is our response? We no longer get groceries. What is our response? And so what we learned from this whole event was we need to look more closely at private sector resources in order to have a fully informed emergency response plan. The other thing, so we got kudos from MACA on our emergency response capabilities, and then they spoke to Protect NWT spoke and applauded, our support of their initiatives in the South Slave. They acknowledged, the added complexities that the road south brings in the summertime with the river access, in the wintertime with the actual winter road, and spoke to that. They acknowledge that they've brought on additional enforcement officers. One of our ex-bylaw officers is now an enforcement officer for Protect NWT, and hopefully keeping people in line. I'm certain she's capable of it. So they spoke to that, and then health spoke, and they talked about COVID response and some of the new guidelines they're rolling out around what to do with flu symptoms, when to do COVID testing, various types of COVID testing that are available. Some of the protocols they're putting in place. Some of the protocols are putting in place now that elective travel south is no longer funded to self-isolate. So if you decide, if you're forced to go south for medical travel, your self-isolation upon return is paid. If you decide to go south to shop, your isolation is not paid when you return. So how is that going to impact how people are self-isolating? You're going to see more people isolating at home instead of at the hotel. So there's going to be a requirement for more aggressive oversight of people to make sure that they're still, playing by the rules, right? So there was talk about that. We had a lot of discussion about communication. Right, this is from the point of view of the town, in this pandemic, we're not going to provide a healthcare response. Our role is sticking to our knitting and making sure we can make water and keep roads clean and do all those things in this environment. The other one is helping to communicate the information, and it's great, that Protect NWT and Department of Health and Social Services is coming up with newer, I think, more informed approaches that better address the issues, but they have to be better communicated to the public. For example, if you come up with new self-isolation requirements and you're making this information available to the people who self-isolate as part of filling out the forms, that's great. But if you don't tell the general public, right, where we're seeing a bit of people policing people happening out there, the general public is now misinformed because they don't know the latest rules because they're not getting out there in time. So we talked about that. We talked about ensuring that the Protect NWT has the depths of resources required. For example, we saw a situation where a guy was traveling and we didn't get the communication about the COVID case in Fort Smith. We found out about it from cabin radio, right? So, I think that they have to have more depth to their organization so that if a person's traveling, they're still able to communicate in a timely manner. Because I was traveling, if we were truly in the pandemic and people were getting sick, communication is essential, and we don't want their communications mechanisms falling down so easily, right? They talked about vaccination schedule in the proposed plan. Basically what's happening, and it's already happening, right, is that first rounds of vaccinations are going to long-term care homes in the major communities that have long-term care homes. So that's Fort Smith, Nunavik, I think Simpson, Yellowknife, Hay River, et cetera. The next step is to go into the smaller communities that don't have immediate access to definitive medical care and doing at-risk populations, people over a certain age, that sort of thing. And that's going to use up most of the doses they have now. They anticipate more doses coming in February, March, and they're going to start kind of going into mass distribution of those vaccines. The details get a little less clear at that point because I'm not sure they have complete certainty about the amount of doses they're going to be getting. But the anticipation is they're telling us by April, sometime in April, they're looking at 75% of the population vaccinated, at least first dose presumably. So that's great news. That's going to be better than the rollout in Alberta, right? We're going to be at 75% vaccinated. I don't see Southern Canada. So I see this thing crawling along a lot slower down south, but we're going to be sitting even prettier. I don't know how the Chief Public Health Officer is going to use these two differing situations to determine what they're going to do about border closures, needs to self-isolate, that sort of thing. But, you know, we're still in January, right? So we're many months away. We heard about a system that Health and Social Services is coming out with, people who have returned and have done self-isolating or who have presented with symptoms and have since tested or found to be not have the virus will be getting return to work cards. So I don't know if the rollout of that is happening yet or if it's beginning to happen. You know, the town volunteered to assist them and guinea pig on it, but it'll be a great tool for employers because right now there's a lot of uncertainty about when we should be bringing employees back, right? They show up with the sniffles at the health center, they're told to isolate for 2 weeks, right? And they also acknowledge that, you know, they need to clean up sort of their internal information and rule setting because what I think we've seen in some cases is they come up with policies in HQ, but they don't necessarily trickle down to the regions in the manner that they intended to, and perhaps there hasn't been enough internal oversight for them to catch that in a timely manner, right? So these return to work cards will help us as employers manage these things because if I've seen any attrition in my own workforce, any impact from the virus, it's not because guys are getting sick and going down. It's just because a person will just get the flu, but it'll take them out for 2 weeks, right? So the clarity around that will be a lot better. The other thing is that's coming out, and the program is not complete yet. It'll be administered by EC&E, and it is a form of getting back on your feet, wage subsidy, business support program that's coming out. That is going to be retroactive to April 2020. So this is money that people can get for losses they've already incurred, as opposed to typically the funds you see, which are, you know, to help you for proposed expenses going forward. This is just to bail you out for losses you've seen. I think it's pretty much done. They're not quite ready to come out with it, but this was sort of the official announcement in this community checkup. I asked if there was going to be any effort to sort of wholesale this with programs available from Canor, from ITI, from other groups that have support programs out for small business, private enterprise, because these guys are busy. They don't have necessarily the time to go door to door knocking and asking for money. It'd be nice if there could be a one-stop, you know, COVID business support storefront that they could go to. Kind of like I was talking Greek when I asked the question, but hopefully at least we've planted the seed and they can think and talk about, you know, what the rollout of this program looks like now that it's designed. So that's the update.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Smith?
Thank you. Thanks for the comprehensive update. I'm really glad to hear that you were discussing supply chains. That was something that was definitely on our radar very much in March. I think, we get 3 grocery truck deliveries to the 2 grocery stores per week. And there was that one time when the grocery truck didn't show up at the end of March, and it was because it was mechanical issues, but nobody knew that at the time, and kind of quickly sets in the community. So we are very vulnerable, and those were early days of pandemic, but I guess my fear is that the resilience of supply chains will be tested greater this time in places like Alberta and Ontario than maybe it actually would have been back in March and April. I just had a question from the meeting. Was anyone in Health and Social Services talking about mental health or well-being? I guess one thing that I'm cognizant of is the Chief Public Health Officer is making pretty bold statements that she doesn't expect travel restrictions to be lifted until maybe 2022 at this point, or at least until Alberta has its issues under control, I think is how she was quoted, which I think puts a lot of added stress and pressure on at-risk individuals or people who have families in other places, etc., around self-isolation. I'm just wondering if the GNWT was talking about the mental health and well-being of its residents as part of this. It sounds like there's a lot of good stuff there, but are they rolling anything out on that side?
Morrison?
No, I mean, I brought it up. I brought up state of mind. I brought up that being sort of at the pointy end of the stick in municipal government, we see it, right? We see mental health issues walking down the street, walking into our offices. And I didn't see a lot of thought about that, and the concern, as I presented, is people are putting everything on the vaccine rollout, right? Everything. People think it's the silver bullet. And, this is kind of bookended by the Chief Public Health statements that are saying, listen, no change for another year, right? And so there's not a lot of clarity in that message. Those are kind of 2 conflicting messages. And so if there's not an effort, I think, to try and rationalize those 2 messages, or heaven forbid, there is a delay in the rollout of the vaccine such that, people let their guard out for March, but the vaccines don't show up for May, and people are going to go out and start socializing and doing all the things they've been told not to do for a year because they're just kind of done with it all, right? There are some concerns there that, we can get ourselves into trouble, and there has to be some acknowledgement of human nature in all this planning, or human need even, right? So I haven't, there was no mention of that. At a higher level, I talked with them again about the concept of operationalizing an emergency, which seems to be happening here. I'll tell a little story. When I was working for Parks Canada, Pacific on Vancouver Island, we had a cougar attack where in one of our visitation areas, a cougar came out of the woods, bit a little kid, and then took off when it realized he wasn't something he wanted to eat. But that triggered an emergency response in the park, but it was an emergency response that was not managed. What happened was all the guys on the ground, the emergency guys, said, we have to find this cougar. And there was no controls put on them. There was no limits or boundaries that said, okay, you're going to search this area, and if you don't find the cougar in this area, you're going to search for this period of time. So these guys just searched and searched and searched and spent. And after like 3-4 weeks, they hadn't found the cougar. They just kind of stopped because they got tired of it, right? And not because anybody set any boundaries around it. So that's kind of what I feel we're seeing here to a certain extent, is that everybody says it's an emergency, which kind of triggered people's ability to spend money and do stuff with less oversight than you would typically see in government. And there's no kind of checks in place to sort of say, okay, this is where we're going to stop and reassess. This is where we're going to take this approach we've decided to use and review it for efficacy. Because what you do at the start of an emergency, right, you wake up, your house is on fire, you do things to put out the fire, is different than what you do 9 months or a year later. If every morning you're waking up with your house is on fire, you're going to do something different after it's carried on for a year. For example, I mentioned to them that what I'm hearing from the private sector businesses is that they would love to have the ability to go and electively choose and pay for like rapid testing and have that somehow impact the amount of isolation time they would take, because of their revenue, their income is based on having to work with people. If they leave and they have self-isolate for 2 weeks, that's 2 weeks of lost revenue. If they could pay for a rapid test, get it, and only have to self-isolate for a couple of days as a result, you know, they would be willing to pay any kind of money to achieve that, because it would be less than the lost revenue of 2 weeks of staying at home, right? But we haven't seen any kind of movement on the 2 week period, even as other jurisdictions look to reduce their isolation period. Things like this, it took them 9 months to determine that, you know what, maybe we shouldn't pay for 2 weeks in a hotel for someone who goes down south for a shopping trip, right? So I think there needs to be some sort of review of next steps, and I think that needs to be communicated clearly to residents, because you are going to start seeing these mental health issues. You are going to start seeing, I think, ignoring of the requirements as people just sort of get tired of this with no end in sight. And on that note,
That's for 2 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Any other discussion? Okay, moving on to other business. Council honoring bylaw.
thank you. So you've seen, we're starting, I don't know what's happened, but I think people entered 2021 ready to talk about what you get paid as counselors, because we've seen a number of applications. We have one before you from Alexander Pryor. There's an additional one from Debbie Payne, and my understanding is there's a third one that has been requested that we will hopefully be able to bring before council next week.
I get a mover. Councilor Campbell.
Okay, I'll do both together.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I move that Alexander Pryor and Debbie Payne be appointed to the council honorarium bylaw review committee.
Second. Councilor Cox. Discussion. Councilor Westwell.
I guess my question is how many residents were we looking for? I believe we were looking for 2 residents. It was, it's strange to be suddenly inundated with applicants, but I just wonder if we should not wait until we received all of the applicants before we appoint and review, or are we just appointing them as the first come, first served? That's my question.
Councilor Campbell.
I think the more applicants we get, just have them all on board and all together.
Excellent. Councilor Westwell.
Sure, how does that work? Like, do you just have 17 people in a room discussing? I just, not that this is gonna come up, but it's ideally like, no, you have to have some structure of how many members make up a committee for quorum and for flow. I mean, I'm very happy to have public input on some of that matter. That's not just a matter of, are we looking for 2, 4, 5, 6, 7? I mean, we're happy just to get 1. That was what we were talking last month, so I don't want to, you know, make it sound like it's a bad thing. I just, are we going to, if we were to have it open to how many members, how does that work? What's our idea here? That do we have any ideas as to how that would work?
Okay, we'll start with Councilor Corbett first.
Just for clarification, sitting on the last review board, there was myself and 3 members from the public. And that was included in the terms of reference that was drafted, I believe, prior to the call for participation.
Next, Councilor Campbell.
So what I'd like to say.
Okay. Any other discussion? Councilor Westwell.
That was my question. If it's three, then that's exactly, we said in terms of reference for the committee the last time, is it the same this time? If so, great, we have three applicants, I just meant, instead of, I don't know that we determined that, because at the last council meeting we had, we discussed the idea of there's no applicants to be considered as one. But we never went anywhere with that, so. Hooray, this new surplus of people who want to help and contribute, and just help. If we're going to carry on with it like we did last time, then great. We have one open spot. When we receive that applicant, great. We can fill the last spot. I just want to make sure that's what we're all. Excellent. Okay.
Mr. Morrison, do you have anything?
I was just gonna say that I think that, last time you just took everybody who applied, which happened to be three people.
Oh.
So you've got three with the potential for another one coming before you next week, at which point I think council, you're gonna have three, or you're gonna have four, and you're gonna make the call, I think, to stop advertising and move forward with the committee.
Excellent. Okay, before we move on to the Fort Smith Health Center, invite CEO.
We actually have to vote.
Oh, okay, all those in favor? I missed that. Okay, anyway, just a quick note here before we move on to the health center. Nowhere on the agenda is the JBT crosswalk. Is that something we're gonna add later? Huh?
Municipal services issue.
Oh, it's in the wrong package. Huh?
In the back of both.
Oh, okay, I just didn't see it on the agenda. Oh.
Board of Revision is on his,
Okay, Board of Revision next.
Thank you. Just a quick check with council. It's that time to reestablish the Board of Revision, where we ask for a member of council and members of public to sit. As for council's direction, last year when we established the Board of Revision, we went to the existing sitting members and asked if they were willing to continue to participate. Previously, there had been 4 people. One of them, Mr. Ransom, has since left town, so we have 3 people. We have checked. They all wish to continue to participate. It's up to council whether you wish to proceed just with 3 members of the public and a councilor, or whether you wish to seek an expression of interest from a 4th. And then based on that, I may be able to get a briefing out before you on it next week, if not the February cycle, where the Board of Revision historically meets in March.
Councilor Campbell?
I think it would be a great idea if we put it up for expression of interest for another member to replace Mr. Ramsey. Did a good job.
I agree.
Okay, so we'll move that one till next month?
Yeah.
Get an extra member? Oh, got any more things?
Do we need to wait till next month, or can we? Well, I guess if the direction is that there's going to be an expression of interest, we have to wait till next month, right? Sorry.
Do we want a recommendation for such, or is that clearly fine? Okay.
Okay, next item, Portsmouth Health Center, and invite the COO, and this was Councilor Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll preface this with a quick comment. Our community as a whole has been concerned with the perceived and purported service capacity of our health center over the years, and it's perceived that they are somewhat diminishing, and this is having an impact on the health services to our residents. Now for a bit of self-disclosure, I brought this forward as a very close friend of mine had a near catastrophic experience over the festive season and has been in Yellowknife in at Stanton since then. As well, this was also brought up again in at the September 1st community service or corporate services meeting, where we received a response from the health center, or at the time we referred to it as a non-response, from the health center about blood testing capacity. They indicated in the letter, they really didn't answer any of the questions. We did have a discussion about reissuing the request to provide more specific questions about what blood tests are being done that weren't previously being offered and what blood tests that are no longer being offered that have been previously provided at the health center. In this particular case, the person was at the health center here, had a blood sample taken, and that blood sample was shipped over to Hay River for testing or analysis. Before the results came back, it was determined that this person needed to be medevaced to Yellowknife. During the flight between Fort Smith and Yellowknife, they were able to perform that blood test on the medevac flight. And in contact with me, the question was, why can't our health center do that same test? Which was a complete blood count test, which is a very common and practical test used by almost all health facilities across North America. I did an inquiry through the health center on Friday, received a response this morning, and basically, again, yes, I appreciate the response. However, quoting patient privacy, it was more of a non-response. He did indicate that there is equipment coming in soon, which is nice to know. With all this in mind, I thought, in light that there is a new COO at the health center, that it might be appropriate for council to have the CEO delegate to the mayor and council to provide us an update on the service capacity at the health center here and maybe address some of the staffing concerns that have also been part of our long-term concerns. With that being said, I had prepared to bring forward a motion, and I'd like to continue with that. If that being said, I'd like to move that Mayor and administration issue a letter to the COO in follow-up to our previous request for specific information on laboratory testing capacity at Fort Smith Health Center, and that the COO of Fort Smith Health Center be invited or requested to delegate to Mayor and Council at the Community Services Standing Committee meeting on February 9th, 2021, to provide an introduction of themselves and to update on staffing and other activities at the Fort Smith Health Center. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councilor Campbell. Discussion. Councilor Westwell.
Yeah, I spoke briefly to Mike about this earlier in the week, and one of my, I guess, concerns, I'm glad the motion covers, invite them to come, because we do have to sort of ask them to join us. What I find challenging is that though these positions are themselves public servants, I feel as a council, it sort of shows where the lack of local boards and kind of it's fallen apart, right? Where we should be meeting and being able to meet with a government to government or a board to a government and advocate to an individual on a board, have oversight and not feel like we're towing the president or the CEO of a bureaucrat in to sort of answer for woes of the government. And I just don't want it to come off poorly, I guess is my challenge or my concern. Though at the same time, I feel sort of at a loss that there's any other path anymore besides towing in who's the biggest wig around and asking them to come talk to us, because without a college board and an active health board or the deals in these sorts of issues, what are we left doing, I guess. I'm stuck with that one. At first I thought that seemed like it's a bad idea. We don't want to invite someone here to answer to but then again, what are we left with? And that's kind of a challenge. So certainly supportive in concept as much as we have I don't know, some sort of a good tone. They're our new COO, so we're happy that they're, well in the position. It'd be good to have a meet and greet with us as well, but I'm sort of still left frustrated that there really isn't any more path anymore for us to communicate to our local large organizations without having to deal directly to a bureaucrat. And I know that's not really what we're supposed to do. We're not really supposed to be government to staff, level. They don't answer to us. They're public servants, they answer to everybody. But without another person to come into air grievances or concerns to bring this kind of stuff to, it's sort of left seeming like maybe the best idea. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Very well said. Deputy Mayor Smith.
So interestingly, we had a very similar discussion in our post-secondary education committee meeting earlier this week. We talked about the lack of engagement from the Minister of Education, the absence of the board to talk to in this context. The three mayors, Gil and I, Benuvik and Fort Smith, got together and have a joint letter underway that they're planning to send to the ECE as the primary campus community is looking for updates on the evolution of the Polytech, not in an adversarial way, but in an information-seeking way, because there isn't a lot of information flowing. So I'm not trying to confuse the issue here between health and social, the local health center and the diminished lack of services. The common theme is how do you talk to the GMWT? As mayor and council, really, this conversation should be with Diane Tom, Minister of Health and Social Services. So we write a letter, and pardon me, Julie Green, the new Minister of Health and Social Services. You write a letter, and then 3 or 4 months later, you get a response saying, "Hey, everyone's very busy in Yellowknife." I guess what I wonder here is what, we have an MLA, so is that not supposed to be our conduit, council conduit to, or residents conduit to dealing with GNWT issues? And I'm not seeing. I guess I'm just kind of echoing Councillor Westfall's frustrations around it. It seems like it's really hard to kind of have conversations with anybody to get you anywhere. So why is that, and what can we do to solve that? I don't think there's any harm in inviting, so long as they understand that it's not, we're not here to hold you to account to every gripe that we have from the health center for the last 10 years that you just showed up. But there needs to be some process of dialogue around these issues, and it's not specific to Fort Smith, New New Deal, and other communities all deal with the same things, and it's the dissolution of the boards that is the center of the problem. So I don't know how we continue to advocate for regional boards to be reappointed to have community representatives on these in these matters where we can actually have conversations with people without it dragging the minister's office into the issue. Yeah, I'm not sure either. I don't see the harm even in, but it doesn't feel like the right approach. So maybe, Randy, if you're on the line, there's an opportunity to have some dialogue with our, with MLA Marcellos as well, or through the joint leadership meetings with Chief Patra and President Heron, and advocate that way to kind of get the NWT's attention on these issues.
Thank you. Can I speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Smith. Definitely the health center is one among several issues that has been brought to the joint leadership meeting with myself, the chief and the president. And we are looking to meet with the premier and with cabinet. So the instance that Councillor Coubret has brought to council is one of several instances that we've heard regarding the health center and laboratory services and or the lack thereof. The letter in response to Councillor Coubret's complaint spoke about looking for, or that the health center was looking to increase some services, but again, in this letter, there was no answer to what the lab was able to do and what they are now able to do and what they're going to be able to do in the future. And clearly, the lab services that we used to have, we don't have those services today. So absolutely, we, as the joint leadership, are looking to meet with the premier and the ministers to bring the issue of the health center as well as other issues forward. If we can get specific cases, because we've brought complaints forward in the past with, there was a case of X, there was a case of Y, there was a case of Z, without having names, then what basically the response that we get is, well, we don't know that this is exactly what happened. Or, you know, this is secondhand or third-hand information. So what works best for us as leaders is having the specific information of who it was so that we can bring those examples to our meetings. Excuse me. So with this case, with the health center, with any other issues, it would be really helpful to give us the incidents, to give us the names, and we can bring those forward. And again, this is definitely one of several issues that we are looking for to speak with the premier and cabinet about.
Thank you, Mayor Napier. Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Next, NWTAC resolutions, Councillor Coubet. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, I guess. Being a professional. Okay, anyway, moving on to NWTAC resolution. Mr. Coubet, you want to speak on that matter?
I believe so. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, much of the conversation of our last topic through Councillor Westfall and Deputy Mayor Smith really highlighted the one of the issues that was brought up last year through one of the resolutions sponsored by the town of Fort Smith, which was for the TNWT to reinstate the boards, and the three that were specifically noted in that resolution was the NWT Power Corp, Aurora College, and the Health and Social Services boards. I received an email from both the mayor and from NWTAC in regards to a question I had asked this morning to NWTAC about whether the government had responded to the resolution. I haven't had a chance to read through it, but I did glimpse at one thing, and they did make reference to the Aurora College one, being that it's been addressed somewhat in the transformation timelines. During our post-secondary education committee meeting yesterday, we also talked about the Aurora College Board of Governors, and it is was suggested that we look at bringing forward either reaffirmation of the resolution from last year or a new resolution, which I would be more supportive of, that calls for the immediate reinstatement of the Aurora College Board of Governors. Being that we have, in my opinion, it is one of the more critical issues to our community, the future of the Polytech. And right now it's being driven by 10 bureaucrats in Yellowknife with no potential oversight. We hear from the minister that doesn't want to get too involved because it should be a arm's length. Yet there is no mechanism in place for it to operate at arm's length right now. So the idea of waiting till September 2022 to appoint a board to oversee the transformation law, that's sort of like my alpaca. We're running clear out of the barn and through the pastures and everything, and be going along afterwards and closing the gate behind them, trying to say, oh, I'll keep them in. It just doesn't make any sense. So as part of my inquiry with NWTAC, they seem reluctant to take on new resolution. And being that this was part of a resolution from last year, I would like to see us really suggest that it has to be a standalone resolution. As long as it's in there with the Power Corp board and the Health and Social Services boards, I think the government is provided with an easy out, saying, well, we're dealing with these other two issues at the same time as we're dealing with this. So they don't really have to respond to the resolution specifically, whereas if we call for the Minister of Education to do his damn duty and reinstate the board, it's clear cut. The other resolution will still be there, calling for the Health and Social Services boards and the Power boards, which again, we should be making sure that that resolution is reaffirmed. So I got this around in a great big circle, so I'm in the process of completing a draft proposed resolution calling for the immediate reinstatement of the Aurora College Board, and I think we should also look at ensuring there was a resolution last year calling for local health boards as well. And I think those two should be our top priority for resolutions going forward for this year's NWTAC AGM.
Thank you, Councilor Goulart. Any other discussion? Councilor Westwell.
I mean, as we covered in the discussion, I think the importance of those boards is just as important and continues to show their importance. I just feel like the pessimism with the government is high, so that they're just not going to reinstate the board, the college board. Like I'm past the idea that they're going to listen. So we're just going for making them refuse more people as often as possible. I just don't know that we're going to get traction. Call me a pessimist on it, but I feel like their softball. No, look, we're going to identify. Here's the strategy. It's just the continuance of this current government and bureaucracy as and how it functions. That said, I don't necessarily disagree with bringing it up again. I just don't know that it's going to amount to anything. But I still think also that, I mean, I just don't know. Does NWTAC consider motions that have already been made on the floor? Like if we reintroduce, or the idea is we reintroduce as a new motion, but it's essentially the same. I'm not sure if the mayor can answer this or not, but is that something that would still be screened through by the executive when they review motions? Is that something that they would, do they entertain things that have already been passed? Is that something that do they take motions again of the same thing, I guess?
They do. So there are different types of, sorry, can I speak? Here. Hello?
Okay, go ahead. You're cutting in and out.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can submit a resolution that has already been submitted. Some of the resolutions, if they're no longer valid, get deleted. Some of them get reaffirmed. So if there's no change, or if a motion is very similar to a motion that has already been passed, then either they will just reaffirm the motion or delete the old motion and then adapt or adopt the new resolution. And the resolutions committee won't reject them. What they do is they'll go through them and categorize them for the AGM to make it easier for the community to go through them. Some of the resolutions are done in groups. Some of them are done individually. So certainly, any motion that will be put forward, it's not going to not make it to the package. If it's found to be very similar to one that has already been done, it may not be adopted. Or what you can suggest is that that it be split out. If you want a specific response to each resolution, as we've seen in the response to the 2020 resolution, the GNWT response to that specific one was pretty short and did not really sufficiently address the concerns that I believe were put forward in the resolution. So my recommendation would be to not to keep, I think to keep all of them, right? To keep the resolution for the health boards, for the power board, for the college, but to break them out separately so that we get a response on each of them separately and they can be followed on or followed up on in that manner.
Thank you, Mayor Napier. Deputy Mayor Smith.
Yeah, thank you. I know we've got a lot on the agenda this evening in our second standing committee meeting. I think the NWTAC as a platform to bring community concerns to a territorial level is still a useful one to pursue. There's a few resolutions that I can think of that have been on there for maybe 10 or more years. 911 service, I think was one that was on there for a long time. Ground ambulance, something that still impacts the town of Fort Smith, the town of Hay River, the town of Newvik is on there. Community infrastructure funding. Hey, all of a sudden there was some extra money doled out last week after 10 or 12 years of talking about the same thing. That extra $200,000 given by GNWT, which got more of an effort for the regular MLAs and what they did in that budget session than other things. But I guess the point is that the resolutions are an opportunity to dialogue and network with other municipalities in the NWT and bring forward concerns and find commonality. There was a recent round of elections for the hamlets, so there's going to be, I don't know exactly what the NWTAC is going to look like this year, but there's going to be some new faces there that might not be so familiar with these issues, but the lack of access and talk to somebody from the GNWT through a public board at a local level is probably something that will resonate with them, and I think it's worth. Well, it seems a bit tedious, and I certainly share your skepticism, Councillor Westwell. That being said, we know that the Polytech transformation wants to appoint Southerners to the board, so maybe by September 22, they'll be able to travel here. I share your skepticism that we'll, get the impact that we want, but I think our role as governance body of the town of Fort Smith is to keep talking about these issues whenever we get the opportunity, and part of that is to provide resolutions, which are then listened to and heard and asked questions about at different forums, and that gets their message out across the territory. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Smith. Any other discussion? Alrighty, moving on. Excusing of councillors. You have a mover. Councillor Cox.
I move that Councillor Bolio be excused from the Community Services Standing Committee meeting on January 12th, 2021.
Seconder. Councillor Christian. Discussion? She did notify? Okay. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Next meeting of the Community Service Standing Committee, February 9th, 2021, I should say 2022, and then review all this stuff. Adjournment, can I get a mover? Councillor Cox.
I move that the meeting be adjourned at 8:18 p.m.
Second. Approve it. All in favor? Aye. Take a 5-minute break before we move into the next one.
So during the 5-minute break, the Zoom continues recording, just so that all members of council and staff are aware of that.
First thing I check. But they can't hear unless the mic is on. We should be us on. Yeah. Looking downstairs.
Essentially anything that's created
Still, I say, working. Yeah, I'm walking.
Yeah, so when you're.
Oh, sorry. This is our actual.
The only thing is,
You're standing,
yeah, I don't know what's going on. I know I went and visited, I'm like,
You're right.
It was created by.
the other day, I went by, John Harris' place, and I'm standing in the middle of his garage. because there's no one over there. Right, you know, and yeah. But that's not, well, that's really good. During this last meeting, I told another 30, they took how long? No, they took back to and they showed up with another person in the room, they come out, I said, you guys, I know it's they come down and there's like,
Well, I just remember there
Well, you should report that to protected when you're getting emails. That's how they get it.
I asked him already. Nothing keeps coming. I asked him, they can put signs up. Do not go by here, there's somebody sitting upstairs.
Yeah.
All I can do is. Put that to the key as well.
That was pretty Oreos.
I don't got a lot of weight.
No, but I'm just thinking of a different job site.
Totally, no, it makes sense. It makes complete sense. When they just put it up, it's staying in a house.
What's next on me? I go on.
Besides, stop sign.
Maybe.
Not here, so.
They don't tell me.
Eight different simultaneous plans on how to fix it.
They don't say a word.
Really? They can even put yourself isolated.
And they will not say a word.
Oh, shit. Yeah, there must be, there should be a requirement to prominently display all entities to your household. You know, a sign. Give them a sign. Huh?
No, but they gotta give us something better.
Yeah.
The people are self-isolating. I'm all that. They're first of all. I'm not gonna say no. If there's good customers before, I'm not gonna say no. I didn't know. I don't know who problem was. Or what time.
Yeah, all the way.
They're up there for them to self-regulate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, no, that's wrong. I think it's wrong. I don't know, but that's not the rules, right? The rules change.
That's the rule that we should be.
You'll have to work tonight.
Yeah.
No,
I asked them.
I don't think it was.
It's going to be there for 3 years. It's gonna meet this Friday.
Well, my students are like,
Are you gonna do
but I had to turn the other side.
elevation?
Where's that?
For Tuesday?
For Tuesday? I might actually.
You wanna order something?
But I told you, I'm gonna tell you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, you guys want me at the council evaluation workshop, you think, or you guys want to do your own thing? Alright, they don't want me.
We're setting you free.
Alright.
I'm pretty gonna say, and I'm gonna be there, so it's fifty.
Yeah.
That was another. Luckily, I'm
I talked to fire chief at Kevin County. You talking?
Oh,
Why?
Water, they're rolled. Yeah,
we're ready.
No,
Are you ready?
Can you push back? Go for it. Yeah, no, talk to him, hopefully he asks us.
I told him.
Alrighty. Let's call the meeting to order. And the agenda is actually almost pretty close. It is 8:23 and I'll call this meeting to order. Do we have any statement or any disclosures of interest? Seeing none. We have no delegations on the agenda this evening. I have somebody move the approval of the agenda. Councilor MacArthur.
I'll move that the agenda be adopted as presented.
Thank you, and seconded by Councilor Brett. Any additions, changes? Okay, we got them all in the last meeting. Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of the agenda as presented? Carried, thank you very much. Included in your package is a copy of minutes from our meeting on December 8th. These were already adopted at our council meeting, December 15th. Does anybody have any additional corrections? Important, nothing? Excellent. Included in the package revision values statement. If there is nothing to add for those items, a copy of the community services master plan and the economic development plan. That's it. I mean the wrong one. Business values and capital plan. They're mostly boilerplate apparently up to that point. Administration.
I'll speak quickly to capital plan items. One, we have received initial pricing from the contractor for the recreation center. It's still in review. I'll try and get to council next week so I can get some dialogue and get the community rollout happening, but it's looking affordable at this point. So that's good. The numbers are close to what we have available, and they're very close if we take into consideration the free money that we received retroactively last week, the $200,000 additional CPI from the GNWT. The other thing I would note, it's not on our capital plan, but it is on someone else's capital plan, namely Salt River First Nation, as their subdivision is proceeding. So you are all aware that Salt River First Nation was able to access federal money for implementation of their community development initiatives within Fort Smith. Well, those tenders are out and people are currently bidding, and the town of Fort Smith has been working with the band. We have been touring contractors through our facilities because we realize that this proposed subdivision being built by Salt River First Nation, approximately 40 homes, will include water lines, sewer lines, roads, ditches, fire abatement initiatives, requirements for garbage collection and tie-in to town facilities, including our water infrastructure and our sewer infrastructure and our lagoons. There will be a need to do work on town roads, go into town lagoons and execute all that work. So we're also in conversation directly with the First Nation to make sure we can put some contractual certainties around this process, because realize, first of all, the town has to do its engineering reviews of the designs to make sure that they meet town standards, that they do not negatively impact the town. We have initially reviewed, realize that this subdivision has been in the works planning for a long time. So in 2018, actually, we reviewed 90% designs. And so I think it will be a relatively cursory review of the tender documents to get that going. We do need to put some contractual understanding around work that occurs on town property, because, we need to have some assurances that contractors working for Salt River First Nation on town facilities are working to, meeting certain requirements. For example, they'll be working in the town lagoon. There'll be need to decant, which is to remove water from some of the cells, and desludge, which is to remove the sludge from some of the cells so as to complete the work. When it comes to decanting and desludging operations, we have requirements and duties to meet as dictated by the authority having jurisdiction, ENR, Mackenzie Valley Land and Water Board. So we have to put in, like contracts and agreements that acknowledge these requirements, and so that has to occur. Further, we have to come to an understanding about how we manage this stuff once it's built. So typically when a contractor, a developer in a municipality builds a subdivision, what happens is he puts the roads in, he puts the water and sewer lines in, etc. Then he gives them to the town. Says, here you go, these are yours, you operate them, you maintain them, you replace them when they break. The idea being that his profit is he sells the properties, or he benefits from having these properties available. And then we assume the infrastructure, operate and maintain it, we benefit from being able to sell water, being able to charge property tax, etc. So one of the things we have to find our way through is that all of these utilities, roads, lift stations, all the things that are going to be built as part of this development exist on Salt River First Nation land. And there are some aspects, some parcels of these lands, which by the nature, banned land can't be transferred. So we have to come into contractual agreements around that. Current understanding is that yes, Salt River does want us to operate, maintain, and replace this infrastructure. They just, they've always stated they want to be part of the town of Fort Smith, and we've always stated we really want this to happen. This can be a great project for the town of Fort Smith. If you think about it, the water and sewer work we had going last year was a $5 million project. This is a $20 million project. So basically what we're seeing is it's going to be 4 times as big happening next summer. We're going to boom for another year, right? This is great news. We want this to happen. We don't want to get in the way of it. So while the tender is closing January 20th, we're going to work in parallel to put all our agreements in place to make sure everybody understands what's happening. At this point, what we're doing is we're exchanging correspondence so that we all sort of understand the expectations of both sides. At which point, locally, we're going to kind of get out of the way and give it to our legal representatives to draft the actual documents. We're talking about, contractual agreements with First Nations where there are sorts of strings, as I stated, tied to access to lands and all that. And that's certainly sort of above my weight class when it comes to contractual development. So we're gonna find appropriate legal representation. They've already got their legal representation in place, and we're gonna sit. We already have a very close understanding of where we want to be with this, and so it's just a matter of, coming up with guardrails on all of it. So it's interesting work. It's going to be a great boon to the community, and it's going to make me even busier.
Thank you very much. That's a very exciting development. That brings us right into the director's report, which brings the chair back to Mike, back to you.
Why, thank you, and I will gladly hand the mic over to Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. I'm going to start off by saying, I'd like to thank Mother Nature for giving us a reprieve with the amount of snowfall and the warm weather we've been receiving the last couple of weeks. It certainly helps us with our ongoing snow removal. You'll notice that the downtown core has been done, schools, various areas around town, cul-de-sacs, widened the roads. So I'm sure I'm going to be over optimistic if this is it, but I know we will have another storm and be doing the same areas, streets over again. On a good note, our new vacuum truck should be here this week. It's scheduled to come in tomorrow. So with the new water truck and the new vacuum truck, we do have redundancy, and that'll be a big plus moving forward. Simcoe Refrigeration, the contractors to maintain ice plants are currently in for their mid-season review of it, and to see if there's any maintenance issues. And water treatment plant, there is a webinar by GMT MACA this week on water license compliancy and sampling protocols that myself and a couple of operators will be sitting in on. And as a final note, I would like to thank the contractors that fixed the pool. They did interrupt their Christmas break to get this done in a timely manner. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for administration? Mr. MacArthur first.
So this is not for administration. This is for Municipal Services Director.
It all goes through the administration first.
Okay, administration. Well, that's the rules, my friend. That's the rules. Okay. Yes, kudos to the town crews for cleaning the roads. I know there's a few mornings I see them go by the house at 5 a.m., not p.m., but a.m. That was nice to see. And then you get a lot of work done 2-3 hours before school starts. Kudos to that. I do have a couple of questions pertaining to, well, the first one is the town of Portsmouth Protective Services. Loading, unloading on roadway. There's 3 violations here. I know, I'm guessing you're not talking about workshop trucking or Malin Coolers because they probably have permits. So what are we discussing here? Somebody, private individual?
Are you jumping over to the protective services reports?
Well, it's all director services, right?
No, actually, it's a little different now.
Waited? Okay, I'll wait. Okay, I'll wait. All right, no problem.
Councilor Campbell.
I'll wait. It's great to see the new water and sewer truck, but can we get some decals put on them?
Yes. We will work on that. Thank you, Councilor Campbell.
If there's, Deputy Mayor Smith.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I think somebody earlier said there's something good on Facebook, which is very rare. And, usually our public works are the victim of people complaining about things that nobody ever comes to town hall about. I just wanted to shout out to Municipal Services, snow removal, condition of the roads in this community have been fantastic all summer. I haven't had any complaints in Bell Rock in the last few weeks, and then a couple of months about unplowed road, so that must be, somebody must be doing something right. So just wanted to, I think our residents tend to take the level of service in the community for granted. You only have to drive around the subdivisions of Hay River or Yellowknife to really appreciate how well our roads are cleared and how busy our staff are. So just really appreciate it. I know it's been a very difficult winter. So I don't know what the spring's gonna be like with all the snow and all the extra water and all the groundwater. But yeah, good look to the municipal services group. Thank you.
If there's nothing further, thank you. That brings us actually on to the protective services report. Back to you, administration.
Thank you. Ms. White, do you want to take this one?
Yes, because you all voted to keep me here for these meetings by not moving protective services to community services.
Well,
Councilor Partner. There was a vote. So we'll start with fire. Nothing particularly, of, significance with fires, December season. The knock on wood is what the fire chief said to me. Had a good Christmas season. They're a little bit, things are picking up a little bit. I'd best mention again with ambulance, the majority of ambulance service in regards to number of calls is for medevacs. That isn't necessarily in regards to amount of time spent, but medevacs do generally take several hours of our volunteers' times. So that is again continues to be our most used service. I think that's fairly typical for month to month. I'll go on to bylaw. So this, you'll see there was a number of dog calls. He's been very busy chasing dogs. We've had a couple of traffic enforcement things in regards to operate without due care and intention, which is I think a very dangerous one, and some speed. But you'll see there are a number of instances of loading and unloading on a roadway or unauthorized parking on a roadway. The loading and unloading on the roadway is, I think, of importance to you for today's meeting because these are school zone issues. This is something that's happening in school zones. Parents are stopping on roadways by PWK and JBT to let their children out of the vehicle or pick them up. So this is a very unsafe practice as well as it impedes the flow of traffic. So I just think that's important for us to note. And I did speak to the bylaw officer, and I know where, because he calls connecting with me on all of his vehicle stops, that he's already had 3, since school started a week and 2 days ago, 3 such incidences that he's done vehicle stops for. Now, these are warnings, these are not tickets issued, but they are warnings and opportunities for education. But I think it's very important for your discussions, even with the stop sign request briefing coming up. That's all I got.
Okay, administration.
I have a question. Due care and attention is that are using the traffic bylaw to enforce cell phone use?
It may be, actually, I didn't check in specifically that one. So really not appropriately driving on the roadway.
Just because while we have an older traffic control bylaw, and since that bylaw was written, we started to see the distracted driving stuff happen. The bylaw, it appears, is strong enough with a clause about operating without due care and intention that it gives us leeway to enforce distracted driving using that clause, which is what I think is happening here.
Councilor MacArthur, that answered your question from earlier.
Oh, definitely, but I do have another one.
Okay.
The protective services. Oh, this is ambulance question. When there's a fire, you hear the sirens for the trucks. When there's an ambulance call, you don't hear the sirens. I was just wondering why. You see lights, but there's no noise. So I'm just wondering. Is there a time when they're supposed to use sirens or not?
So on a medevac, which again is our majority of our calls, they would not use sirens. They would have lights on so people can see if an emergency vehicle, but because it's not an emergent situation, it's a controlled situation, they wouldn't run the siren. Sirens would only be really responsive if they have to have traffic move out of the way, and that there's a possibility they may not come to complete stops at intersections and that sort of stuff because it's in a life-threatening emergency. Typically, a medevac has some level of stability, and it is controlled with the paramount ambulance that are with the flight. So they would not run. They would run with lights, but they would not run the sirens in those situations.
Oh, yeah, I'm aware of the medevacs. I've seen them going out. I would run lights too, sirens. It's just that I'm on the corner of Calder and King, so they come from the hospital and they go down Calder 9 out of 10 times on calls, and it's just, there's no sirens, so unless they can, when they get to either house, they can see there's no traffic on, and they just keep going, which is a good thing, again.
And again, so they would not necessarily run the sirens unless there is traffic that needs to move out of the way. So they can turn that siren on and off, and you might see that with law enforcement as well. Unless they're actually moving through traffic, they may not run sirens.
Any other questions for administration? The rest of the reports? Hearing none. Thank you very much. That brings us down to the Sustainable Development Advisory Board. I can provide a brief update as to that. We had a meeting last Thursday. Seemed to be well attended. They're getting their teeth into new issues, which are detailed in the minutes. Does anyone have questions? Other comments?
I have questions about the minutes from the December 3rd meeting, so I'm not sure, so I'll ask my questions and if there's an update based on last week's meeting.
Right, I forget that the meeting that we just had won't be available yet, right? And I was not actually in attendance for this meeting, so.
My first question is, administration answered that earlier this evening about the $50,000 received for the funding to perform the business case study. Right, we received the funding, found it was last week. Okay. Second question is there an update about, oh yes, whether or not, this might be a question for the mayor actually, attending the Sustainable Communities Conference back in the fall. There was some discussion about that at the December meeting. And the mayor was going to provide an update about her attendance at the conference, the online conference with FCM, Sustainable Communities, on page 2 of the minutes, just about the new business.
Thank you.
Please.
Okay, thank you. I apologize that this lately fell off my radar, so I can, I'm not sure what is the date of the next sustainable development meeting.
Beginning of February.
Okay, I will commit to having something for that meeting.
Sorry, Councilor Fox.
Okay, thank you, Mary Nanker. And then I just had one last comment about, it looks like the board has a new chair with Alyssa Etzel, so that's good to see, and congratulations, I guess, to the new members of their board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Correct.
Yeah, just a note, with respect to the, I guess it'd be, item B, zoning and sale of regulated items. I'm just wondering if we have received any update as to the GNW's plans for consultations on the regulations regarding vaping products. I believe that was supposed to be done. They were originally, I think, looking at the March, April timeframe, and COVID-19 may have derailed their original plans for that. I was just wondering if there's any knowledge of how that consultation process is going.
Not to my knowledge, no, I'm not aware. Apparently, a new act came into force March 31st, 2020. Sorry, I missed it. Go ahead, take a minute.
I don't have the information in front of me. I did read something within the last few weeks around sales of marijuana products being completely underwhelming for the GNWT and not meeting anywhere near their revenue projections or tax revenue projections. I think that's part of the supplementary budget discussions that happened in the fall, so that may impact their approaches to private contracts moving forward. And I think that's a national phenomenon too. I think in general, most provincial governments and the government did not receive the tax revenues they were expected projected to.
Believe it or not, it's almost like the government's really bad at retail. Okay, if there is no other questions for Estelle, I would just note how, yes, I gushed a little bit. I'm so happy to see another chair. Not that the other chairs haven't done a great job, but just that this is the third new chair that Estelle has had, which is fantastic that we're able to get new people to take on the role of chair. As in the past, Estelle had struggled, and I had to act as chair as a counselor briefly on a number of occasions over the years, just because of people either being intimidated by the issue or not necessarily engaged in what we're dealing with. So I'm very excited to see new people still be willing to take on the mantle, and that's fantastic. So,
yeah, so to tidy that up, I'd like to move the recommendation. I move that Alyssa Etzel and Frank Lapina be reappointed to the Sustainable Development Advisory Board for a 2-year term ending December 31st, 2022.
Fantastic. Seconded by Councillor Cox. Discussion. All those in favor of the recommendation? Carried. I don't believe we have anything else under bylaw policy review and development. Administration. Do you have anything to add? Okay, perfect. So which brings us right to 10A, other business, briefing note for the JBT stop sign request.
Thank you. This one was actually written by Ms. White, but I'm going to talk first just to steal all her thunder, and then I'm going to hand the details, the boring details over to her. But if you read the briefing note, it provides a summary. It talks about the request from the DEA, and we brought a quick analysis that basically gives council 4 things to think about. And you know, the idea is that these are kind of medium to short-term responses until we can sit down and do an overall traffic analysis for the community, which will be loaded into the 2021 capital plan. But one is to put stop signs in straight up. There's no real cost to that. We have the stop signs. It would be staff time that's in put them in place. The other option is additional signage lighting. This is the flashing light. This is maybe the push button pedestrian crosswalk kind of thing. The prices are all over the place. We have a number of different quotes, which Ms. White can speak to, but you know, you're looking at us at a limit of about $10,000 to put something like that in. The third and fourth options are just to kind of reinforce the status quo. One is continued traffic enforcement, as Ms. White alluded to. We can just throw more horsepower behind it. As we've nailed 6 people for blocking the roadway so far in the past month, since we just put our minds to it, to try and indicate, you know, how we can improve the situation just with enforcement. The other one is to, basically state that pretty much every other jurisdiction in Canada has crossing guard programs. The presentation from the DEA stated that they had a crossing guard program, but they stopped running it. So, we're to put in stop signs because the DEA is no longer running, or the JBT is no longer running a crossing guard program. So one of the approaches might be to ask them to reinstate that program and confirm its efficacy. And if they don't, they put in a crossing guard program and they're still experiencing problems, then perhaps we look to move at that point. Or, combinations of the above. There's multiple items of these that can be taken into consideration. So I'll hand it over to Ms. White. She can perhaps, speak in more detail specifically, perhaps some of the light options or enforcement options that we can put into place.
Wow, I feel like you did all the good stuff there. So yeah, again, the traffic calming measures are really meant to support as we move forward to the overall analysis. Keeping in mind that behaviors are difficult to change, and that we have a very busy school zone with both of our schools on the same block, and multiple crosswalks. I know the DEA is addressing this one crosswalk, but we have multiple crosswalks where young children are crossing the street. We have 3 directly in front of the schools, plus the one across field and the one across Conner. But, just in the parking lots and everything. So there are multiple places there. So we did look at, the Director of Municipal Services got a number of quotes. One was an actual plan for multiple signs or multiple crossing signage at all of the crosswalks. Identifying that, I think the bylaw officer is making it clear that he is pulling people over all over the school zone for these infractions around safe usage of the roads and crosswalks. So it's not just that one crosswalk in front of JBT school. So yeah, we're looking at from, just a light sign, a flashing light sign with speed indicated to all the way to having that same sign plus additional, crossing signage with flashing lights, or something as simple as just adding a light component to our current crosswalk signage to draw attention to it. Stop signs are one option, but people can race off stop signs. It does not necessarily change the speed at which people are traveling through that section of the road. If you think about driving without due care and attention, that is the same as driving to stunting or doing any of those kinds of things that drivers sometimes do off stop signs. The bylaw officer is there every day, usually at least twice a day, so usually at least the morning or afternoon at the lunchtime. He definitely has concerns with the drop-off area, in that there are obstructions in that area that make it difficult for drivers to see kids crossing the road, whether they're going at the appropriate rate of speed or a higher rate of speed. Those obstructions still exist, and how kids are crossing the road without parents or without an adult supervision or a trained person supervision, that's hit or miss depending on the excitement of the kid to get into the schoolyard and the temperature outside. So he is there every day. He has spoken to the RCMP. They are happy to come out and do some additional enforcement with him around that school zone. But again, that is dependent on other commitments that RCMP are dealing with in regards to crime in the community, right? Traffic control might be dependent on what else is happening in the community. Typically, the bylaw officer provides warnings, whether they're verbal or written, depending on the number of instances. He rarely provides an actual ticket to an individual unless they're a multi-infraction kind of situation where he's getting them regularly for the same offenses. You could go through a period of actual ticketing in the school zone where everybody gets a ticket no matter what. So those are the kind of enforcement things we could do. I agree with with the SAO, and that we have to look at how all of these particular things work together. Perhaps the school could be doing some education around safe drop-offs in the school zones. They could reevaluate whether or not they want to use this parking lot across the street as a drop-off because of those obstructions that are there, the way that the vehicles are parked and how the kids access the crosswalk zone. So there are a number of options, and I think that simply putting up stop signs may not be the only solution or the best solution, but we might, if that is the way we go, we need to look at those things in conjunction with other options as well.
Thank you very much. I had Councillor Cox first.
Thank you for the briefing note and the, I guess, the analysis and the options presented. I'm not convinced stop signs are going to solve all the problems with traffic flow around both schools, specifically with respect to the request from the DEA, specifically to the crosswalk crossing the Dougal across from JBT. Traffic issues in the area are not new. This has been an ongoing issue almost as long as I have lived in the community. It is interesting to me that we're looking at solving the crosswalk issue on the Dougal Road when the parking lot between JBT and Uncle Gates Friendship Center, which is used for staff parking and student pickup for JBT, is also very problematic and a significant risk to anyone, but particularly young children walking in the area, walking in that parking lot. And it has been an issue for perhaps as long as the building has existed, and it has not been addressed. I want to support the school in solving this problem from a town's perspective, but I also see this as a problem that the school needs to take some initiative to solve. If this were a business that had made the decision to build a parking lot across the road and then ask the town to put up stop signs to help control traffic, it would be a different conversation. And then a final factor I think we also need to consider is what the new duplex development on the corner of Connerberry and Dougal, how that is also going to affect traffic flow in the area. I agree something needs to be done. I don't necessarily think 2 stop signs are going to solve the issue. And the absence of the students' crosswalk program, it's not COVID that stopped that from running. That hasn't run for at least 3 years, maybe longer. So I think I'd like to see more discussion with the schools about what the town can do. I mean, flashing lights at all the crosswalks, that sounds very reasonable to me. I don't think, I think there needs to also be a demonstration from the school that they're prepared to help address the issue. It's not just a town of Fort Smith issue to help solve.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell.
Okay, I agree with Councillor Cox. It shouldn't be all our responsibility. We should be talking to the school, or they should be talking to the GNWT to get a traffic consultant or somebody in there to put better roadways for the right-of-ways for the buses on the west side or the south side or I don't know what street it is. Between school and Brain Hall. Redo all that, instead, pick that parking lot out there, put the proper laneways for picking up kids and everything, get them off the street and quit crossing the main artery at Dougal. And then we should have, it's a good one for the RCMP to become community involved for traffic control, give out some tickets, get to know everybody. And they can make that drop-off area on McDougal, make it easier accessible 4 or 5 times as long. I'm going into the playground off McDougal when you're coming, I don't know what way, off the side you lose. Yeah. Okay, thanks. That's all I want to express my.
I did, Mayor Smith. Thanks. You can imagine I've been lobbied pretty hard on this. At the end of the day, the safety of the roads in the town are our responsibility. That's one of our core mandates on citizen safety. And I guess the school, I mean, I can't speak specifically what the school's done recently. I know in the past they have, they built an additional drop-off zone that took away part of the playground of the, where I'm talking about on McDougal there. So there has been attempts. I think you're right. The whole area is a bit of a mess. Specifically, the concern was brought to us with speed on McDougal and a request to reduce that speed. So I guess going back to what I was saying in December, I agree that a traffic management plan that looks at this in a comprehensive way is the long-term solution. My sense is that better signage, lighting, some kind of coordinated response between the DEA, the schools, and the town is ultimately the right solution. My question is, does that address a safety concern that has been brought forward to council in an immediate way? Lights cost money, there's a procurement process, that'll all be part of a traffic program, the traffic plan. So in the interim, I really appreciate the involvement work of the bylaw officer, especially the parents that stop in the middle of the road and let their kids out of that. I've seen that so many times, both in PWK and ABT. And I've actually talked to several parents, you see them in the grocery store, like, what are you doing? Like, do you really want to danger that is? Car coming the other way, can't see a kid crossing the road. There's so many levels to that. My big fear about this, and having been on council for a number of years, is that we talk about the issues all the time, and then there's always a more pressing concern that comes along that means that something else has to happen. We've already talked about all the capital initiatives that are coming up this summer. So how realistic is it that this traffic plan is coming soon? And so what do we do in the interim? How do we meet the request or the identified need? And I guess that's where I struggle with it, because as I said, I think that the long-term solutions are probably not stop signs, but in my mind, the installation of a temporary stop sign at Condair and Brena is probably the best short-term solution to go for. If then at least you are slowing traffic down, you're supplementing what your bylaw officer is doing. If the motion is as a temporary stop sign, put a time limit on it, remove it. You're not beholden to it. If it's not working and there's a huge community backlash, you can remove it. If it does work and people like it, then maybe that's a really simple, cost-effective solution to a problem that we're over-problematizing. So that's kind of my way of thinking about it.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Any direction from council administration?
Is there a need perhaps for council to workshop this out with the DEA a little bit? Maybe sit down and talk, the county council is committed potentially to acting immediately, and just finalizing that with the DEA. You have the request, but perhaps there's a bit of an iterative process here. Council has reviewed the request, come up with some of your own concerns about, how traffic flow is managed or what could be done internally or with preventative measures. Perhaps there's a combination again of both. Perhaps there are stop signs or lights, but at the same time, perhaps there's some lines painted in the Granite Hall parking lot to better manage traffic. Or there's some other initiatives. We'll put on stop signs if you put in a traffic card. or something like that. Perhaps there's a need for that additional conversation. Meanwhile, there is a commitment to move ahead with stop signs, or perhaps there's a little bit of a budget put to this. Maybe there is a $10,000 budget identified that might go to lights, or might go to line painting, or might go to developing a better drop-off area or something.
Mr. Campbell?
Well, the best initiative is have the RCMP out there giving them tickets out now. Starting tomorrow, phone, you would get the RCMP and starting at lunchtime and start enforcing speeding and stopping and everything. And the initiatives out of their pocketbook. Insurance at the end of the year. That's one of the things they'll look at.
One of the questions I had was the prices identified, let's say for $6,500 per unit. Was that just for the light fixtures themselves, or is I'm assuming that's not installation? Yeah, that's all my question, I guess, for formality's sake. Because the identified price of $64.98, what would that get us?
I think a lot of it's both on the signs with solar powered battery packs, so there's not a lot of trenching and whatnot required. So we probably do internal install. But if you want to after the fact, I think Mr. Kaiser has some cut sheets from some of the options that he can show you.
Yes, I'm not sure what the exact process would be here, but I think Mr. Morrison's onto something with the further dialogue with the DEA. They written a letter to the RCMP asking for more speed control in the community. Is there, I know the DEA is strapped for money. Is there a way to, are there parent volunteers who could run the crosswalk program? Has that been explored, et cetera, right? There's a number of initiatives there. So maybe, I'm not exactly sure what the dialogue here would be. Maybe we don't want to go for a further delegation. Perhaps the mayor can speak to the DEA and work out some kind of I don't know, looking for suggestions about how that moves forward. But I think that's probably the best way to deal with the issue in the interim.
Okay, so I'm not sure how to move that forward, but I do agree it's an interesting idea to bring that question back to the person who's requested to work with them to come up with some sort of a solution. That said, council or the committee sounds like there's a bit of differentiating opinions about what it is that we should have and what we want to put in or what we think the town should be doing. So I think workshopping it either with ourselves or maybe workshopping it before we workshop it with the DEA might be worthwhile if you're considering an immediate solution. If it seemed to be unacceptable to wait for a traffic management plan and you're looking to come up with something in the short term, immediate plan, then one, committing to that's something you want to do, and two, figuring out what it is you're willing to support. If we're otherwise we're getting into bargaining with the DEA over what with tit for tat over, which I mean it's fine if you know what exactly our position is, but sorry, Keith.
I think the director is going to say in the interim we'll crank up the enforcement. We'll bring it up to DEFCON 5, start actually giving cost money tickets out, and be more aggressive on that.
And to Campbell's point, inviting the RCMP to participate with us as they can. Obviously, they have unlimited staff and some other things going on, but our bylaw officer can issue the appropriate tickets and with the fine attached. Most of the things are covered in our traffic act, some of them which are fines that are less than the Highway Traffic Act or the Motor Vehicle Act. But those are ways we can even amp that up, right? First ticket can be with ours, and then second ticket, the RCMP may want to issue a ticket under the Motor Vehicle Act at a higher level of a fine. So I can usually 2 to 3 times the stop fine that we issue. So.
Councilor Brooks.
I think, in terms of immediate solutions, I think that could be very effective. I mean, the reality is, the issue is how people drive is what we're trying to deal with here. So that's if we have the resources, if the bylaw officer is available to do additional enforcement, then I think that's certainly a good start to moving from there.
Councillor Campbell.
Well, I want to see that happen right away so nobody ever does get hurt. But we still have to keep looking at these lights or do something, keep forward. We can't let this drop till next 2 months from now. Let's keep the ball rolling now. You're talking to the DA, you're talking to whoever, let's just keep it going and make sure it doesn't stop.
Thank you. Councillor Brother.
Yeah. I've been here all my life, so I went to JBT and PWK. Now just imagine what the back of JBT Brennan Hall area would look like if the greenhouse and brown house were still here. Or what the main drag and McDougal in front of the school would look like if we didn't have bylaw. Thank God for bylaw. Now with all the vehicles in the front and the back, we never had that problem when I was going to school. Because we walked to school. These days you can ride to school.
And you hitch your horses in the front, right?
You open up a whole can of worms and but walking both ways to uphill. But generally, no. I mean, you're the bus driver. You know how many kids get to take the bus versus even get a ride as well, right? It's things have changed. No different than the size of vehicles in parking lots downtown. They're no longer big enough because vehicles had to get 30% larger. Yes.
Yeah, just in all seriousness, I think Councilor McCarthy is actually onto something. I know Community Services Advisory Board is looking at active transport, issues around active transport, which means that kids on foot and on bikes and whether it's scooters, whatever ways they want to get around town. We've already had a discussion at council around trail networks and better integrating our recreation facilities in the schools with trail networks and how crosswalks tie into all of that. It's all part of this conversation in a very serious way. We want to be the healthiest community in the NWT, or for beyond. Walking to school is definitely part of that. I guess it's funny to. I mean, over the last 5 years, this has been stop sign council. There's one thing everyone can run for re-election and feel proud about is how many stop signs they put up around town. There's been at least not only do we put them in 4 official languages, there's been at least half a dozen stop signs placed in the community in the last 4 or 5 years at various places where residents have complained. So it's not like council hasn't been active on this, but I think it all speaks to the need for a larger, more coordinated plan. The issue with the school zone is that there's no appropriate drop-off area for them, like you typically see at other schools where cars pull in, they're off the road, they're given a safe space, and then it's a one-way, and then they move back into the system. And we have that a little bit at JBT, but not anywhere else. So I think the long-term solution is entirely right, that it might be JBT's responsibility to kind of clean up that mess in consultation with the town. As Councillor Campbell said, the enforcement issue is really important. We just don't want to let this go for 2 months. I mean, if things aren't changing, I do think we need to look at a temporary stop sign.
If I could unhat for a second I do think, I actually really appreciate the idea of the flashing lights. I think that's a really fantastic addition through a lot of our crosswalks, the areas that are dark and can be brought attention to. So I mean, I mentioned before, over years, there's usually a resilience or resistance to the idea that enforcement doesn't need stoplights or blinky lights. You've got this from. But I think it'd be a great solution to draw attention to important, intersections and crosswalks. So that's for my support there. And otherwise, yeah, not an easy mess to fix, but my concern is with bylaw picking up more slack is that's a resource problem or resource question for administration if they think that it's possible that we can go to con 5 and not, you know, cut off a different leg, then, you know, so be it.
Well, that's exactly what's gonna happen, right? We're gonna put all our energy into enforcement of traffic around schools, and then you're gonna start hearing complaints about lack of dog enforcement, right? We went through the dog enforcement thing, we focused more on dog enforcement, you stopped hearing about dog enforcement, you started hearing about school zones, we want to put energy back into school zones. You can, the bylaw reports read like a book, right? You can see that as councils pushed us one way, other areas have sort of seen the reduction in attention, and this is where the other study we talked about is the review of our bylaw services to see if we need a dog catcher as well, and we need additional resources. So we have a couple of journeys we're going on here, right? Talking about this immediate program administratively, we'll throw the enforcement book at it. That will, I think, kind of, you know, take us 85% of the way there, ensuring safety. I think there's a commitment from council that you wish to act. I don't know if I see the consensus, whether it's blinky lights or stop signs, and I think perhaps council might want to sit and have that conversation, as I said, with the DA, maybe do some dash. Do you want blinking lights? Do you really want a stop sign? You know, are we doing anything but a crosswalk program? What about putting some skin in the game in this and having that conversation? And that can be a thing that if we start enforcement now, a month from now, we'll have some more direction from council about blinky lights or stop signs, and we'll do that. Realize even if we do a traffic plan for traffic flow may not address private infrastructure. A traffic plan that we do as the town probably won't address how the drop-offs happen on school, because as Councillor Cox said, that's like a private business, right? We don't get to tell them how they do their thing. So these initial discussions with the DEA are hopefully the first step in advancing sort of probably something that's going to be missed by the traffic plan, which is INF and ECE, you know, fix your infrastructure, because what you got now doesn't work, and it doesn't really make sense for us to put up a bunch of stop signs and blinky lights to deal with the fact that you're perhaps not setting up your infrastructure properly. So I think we can put the blinky lights up and we can put the stop signs up, as Deputy Mayor Smith said, sort of a temporary midterm action. But ultimately, it's not just ADT and McDougal, it's Brandon Hall, it's in front of PWK, it's kids getting dropped off at the rec center and walking through the rec center to get to school. It's a whole bunch of things because there's been no thought put into how these buildings are accessed in a safe manner. Right, and so that conversation has to start, and that might start with the DEA and council sitting together, not as a delegation, but in a workshop where people share and exchange ideas and opinions.
Okay. Productive conversation. Anything further at this time? Excuse me, I'm sorry, was that? Is any direction, any comment, any recommendations? Somber thought and consideration, Councilor Cox?
Maybe this could be an item on our agenda for our priorities discussion on, oh no, I'm seeing shaking heads. I'll stop talking and let other councillors speak.
Councilor Campbell.
Well, I think the direction we should go is ask our bylaw for temporary to be up to enforcement, ask the RCMP to join in. And if people don't want the RCMP or them park, let them give out tickets, ask them to give out tickets. And then, but we still got 2 weeks, meet up with the DEA or whatever and make some kind of plan with lights, and we gotta slow them down. But give out tickets, I still think that'll be good one for a while. Right, immediately.
Councilor Webb.
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that, even by, means of a motion, that, the mayor write the DEA to organize workshop and for it to be done in the next, 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay, Keith. Are you seconding that, Keith?
No, I was gonna say, we could probably just do it administratively too. We could just send out emails, ask the DA if they'd like a lunch with council, something like that. and have a lunch and sit and talk.
Councilor Fred.
Yeah, it's direction to mayor and administration to facilitate a workshop at the earliest convenience of both parties.
Okay. And I'm hearing direction otherwise, some form of consensus to supporting the town of Fort Smith's amplified efforts for bylaw enforcement on traffic control. I see many shaking heads in favor. Okay.
Yes.
Where's the bylaw officer? Yeah.
Use that term, get compliant.
Okay, I also believe that DEFCON goes the other direction. Not actually DEFCON 1 is the. Oh, is that? Okay, so with that, we have some direction, something we can tell the DEA, hopefully we'll be able to arrange some meeting with them. Anything further on this matter? No more hands? Excellent. That brings us to item 11, excusing of councilors. Can I have somebody move the excusing of Councilor Regret?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Councilor Bolio be excused from the Municipal Services Standing Committee meeting of January 12th, 2021.
Thank you. Then I was seconded by Councilor MacArthur, I believe. Discussion. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. The next meeting of Municipal Services is February 9th, 2021. And somebody move the adjournment. Councilor Cox.
I move that the meeting be adjourned at 9:22 p.m.
Thank you. Seconded. Councilor Correct. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Have a good night.
So one of the things was you guys put together a package of some of the research